If you have an Ender 3 or an Ender 3 Pro and you've decided to upgrade your machine by using dual Z-axis rods, you probably no longer have a grounded frame. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. How Creality grounds their frames to the power supply and thus to the earth on your mains line. So it's actually quite interesting, and for this little demonstration we're going to be moving over to my friend's machine here, because despite the fact that it is indeed a bit messy, it will illustrate the point. So here's the thing. When you have your Ender 3 stock, it is connected to the power supply like such, where there are screws that protrude through the frame into the power supply. And those holes would be right here and right here. And they would go through the frame here and right here. And you'll notice that the holes on the frame are bare. They're not anodized. And that's important because an anodized piece of metal doesn't exactly conduct electricity very well. So what they've done is they use the frame of this power supply and the frame of this printer with a bolt going through to this to ground the frame. Now that ground is then connected to the earth, which is the yellow and green cable. Now here's the thing. The moment you add a second rod for your dual Z's, you can no longer put the power supply where it once was. You have to unbolt it and situate it somewhere else, which means those bolts that were holding the power supply to the frame, which were also acting as the ground connection between the power supply and the frame, are now gone. You no longer have a grounded frame. There's a very easy solution to this, and you can double check your work with a multimeter pretty easily with the continuity settings. All you really got to do is get yourself some wire, a spade connection, and that'll connect into the same exact spot where you have your earth on the power supply. And for us, we use this green cable to denote that it is a ground connection. And then we use a ring terminal. It uses an M5 bolt to screw into the threads on the back of the frame. And bada bing, bada boom, your frame is now grounded to your power supply, and that ground connection goes through the neutral prong in the cable, which goes to the neutral connection or earth connection on your mains, which means you'll now have a grounded power supply. Now then, there are some things to note. If you're using V-rollers, or V-slot rollers on your axes, those are insulative, so you might not get grounding on things like your X-axis gantry. Now, I haven't personally tested that because, as you can see, on this Ender 3, everything is a linear rail, which means every connection is connected to another part of the frame with a metal connection. So we actually have continuity from the earth connection on our power supply through the entire frame. So my entire frame here on this is in fact grounded because I'm using linear rails. There is no insulative V-roller. Now, for contrast, this machine over here does have linear rails on the Z and X axis, but not the Y axis yet. You can see the V-roller right there. It's pretty worn. But because that connection right there is rubber, it does not conduct electricity. Therefore, any part of the machine that is on a V-roller is probably not getting a proper ground in the first place. And this is kind of a notorious thing with Ender 3s and Ender 3 Pros for this particular reason. If anything, not only are linear rails a great upgrade for consistent performance, but also because they do help ensure that the entire frame is indeed grounded. So, that's a simple little thing to check if you've got dual Zs. Just remember, it's you'll find the yellow and green connection, that's your earth, but you should also look up on Google, what does a ground or earth connection symbol look like? That will be on your power supply once you take off the shroud, just like there'll be positive and negative connections. And then you're just extending that earth connection to the frame here. And when you're checking for continuity with a multimeter, you don't want to check on any part of the frame that's anodized, because that's not going to really conduct electricity. You want to check on a piece of the frame that is bare metal, because that's what's going to conduct the electricity. And as long as you get continuity between this part of the frame right here and the neutral on, or neutral, ground, earth, whatever you want to call it, on the power supply, then you should be okay. So there are things like that to take into consideration when you are upgrading your machine. Creality doesn't tell you this when you upgrade to dual Zs. This is just something that you have to find out along the way. So hopefully this helps you.